we have to start with, if you don't know, Item Pro is the most commonly used available assembler that accounts for
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Can everybody hear me okay? Is that yes or no? Yeah? All right, cool. All right, so thanks for coming out tonight, or this morning. Sure, it's still tonight for some of you, but our talk is going to be on Windows. Adam and I worked together for about a year. We're not necessarily anybody special, don't have any credentials. This is a little Daniel Bahanin shout out at the top. That is a valid Windows command. So overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about why you should care about Windows logs, even if you've already read the NSA white paper on detecting lateral movement and you're already collecting logs. There's probably something that you can gain from this talk. We hope that after watching this talk that you should be able to go back to your environment and deploy these things. I'm going to show you how, in any aspect of IT, getting customer.
The whole assembler's been moved to 64-bit, but the implications for IDA-Python with this new update, and you should go in and understanding this talk more, is they created a whole new SDK and API. Basically rewrote everything, changed everything. Changed most of the things from camel case to snake case, moved a lot of things in between different modules, removed some portions, added new stuff, things like that. That being said, they were nice to us. They kept the compatibility layer in there.
All right, get a redo.
So that most things will still work and operate.
What's that?
But for this talk, what you should know going
Is this better?
I have not fully tested.
Guess I'll make it closer. All right, cool. So again, why care about Windows logs, even if...
So my goal is to get
good
that
job.
done
Smooch your phone.
be able to be like, yep, you're good to
All right.
go. You can expect this behavior.
Third time's the charm. So why you should care about Windows logs, even if you've read the NSA white paper on detecting your adversary, even if you're already collecting security logs, we are sure that you'll be able to gain some from this talk. We're also going to show how you can take these examples back to your customer or back to your company. The biggest thing in anything in IT and security is usually hacking the human versus really securing the network. So we developed some time on how you can use these logs to gain support. Show our Cuckoo setup network. We're going to show a bunch of examples. Adam's going to speak a lot on the analysis aspect from the analyst side. And then a bunch of issues that we ran into over the last year deploying this, and then release the majority of our scripts for Cuckoo, some of the PowerShell parsing, DNS debug, like filtering, so you're only enabling DNS debug on servers instead of just deploying the scheduled task on every single device in your network. So why Windows logs? This is a hackers conference. I'm sure you guys know that your endpoints are going to become compromised. Just making sure I'm at the right place. Okay. So you have traveling users, right, that might be gone out of the network for a month, 2 months, maybe 3 months. Maybe they just hate the office. They're not getting patches. They could just become compromised at the hotel. You've all seen this stuff in the news, right? So, and insiders. You have to just assume that somebody already has access or will gain access. It's industry agreed. Matt Swan just spoke about this on Friday. So if one of the leads at Microsoft says it, I'm no smarter, so I'm just going to listen to him. There's infinite use cases. I mean, anywhere from geoplotting, wireless authentication logs using something like Wiggle. It's free, simple to implement. All the stuff that we've done, you should be able to do at least in a day. You're only going to need 1 or 2 Windows licenses. That's just for a server. You don't even have to use a server. You can just use a regular computer. I'm sure most people have money. They can buy a terabyte or 2 of hard drive for a web server for under $1,000 or something. So if you don't already have the storage. And Matt Swan quoted somebody else on this too. Advanced actors do leave logs. It was a quote from like a murder investigator, that every time somebody goes into a house, they leave bits of themselves in the environment, and the environment is left on them. And then everybody's seen a Sysmon talk. This isn't a replacement, it's a supplement. We recommend using some of the things that we talk about in here, because Sysmon is more of a like initial compromise. It can be used to detect lateral movement, but there are use cases in here that we show that it just wasn't designed to do. It's not going to catch. So, and don't let your vendor tell you this. You can do a lot with just a few people and no money. So again, the prereq, most important prereq is become friends with your system admin, get acquainted with help desk, the process, the hiring process, the golden image deployment, those sort of things. To my wife's demise, I probably talked to our system admin more than her some nights, so 2, 3, 4 in the morning. But in all seriousness, they're going to be the ones who are going to be able to swiftly deconflict the things that you'll catch during these during looking at these logs. They're going to be the ones who have the access to deploy the GPOs, and they're going to, and someone like HR is going to have insight into a department. So when you have somebody like Sub-T and all these things that he's releasing, specifically like .NET libraries, which is when we created this talk back in February, you know, a non-developer shouldn't be running .NET libraries very often. So being a part of that process, you can deconflict these things that you find. And so when a customer comes to you, your customer or your company or whoever says, well, I don't want to deploy this. Us being pretty young, there's a lot, you know, dealing with a lot of people who've been in this industry, probably when we were in diapers. You know, well, is it going to slow my network down? Is it going to break it? Well, Windows log is basically sent over HTTP. So if your network can't handle HTTP to begin with, then there's probably a bigger issue. But we've even deployed this with 17 sites in one state, with all the logs going across a VPN to Columbus, and then from Columbus to a place on the East Coast across the network where our SIM was, and there's about 200 or 300 hosts collecting from like 40 or 50 different channels. You know, I'm talking like a 5 or 7 or 8 megabit pipe. So it really shouldn't cause any issues. You can limit the CPU resources. You can limit how slow it sends it, how fast it sends it. There's essentially no reason that it should cause an issue on your network. And again, there's many use cases of these logs that you can help your help desk, you can help your system admins get out in front of errors. Whether it's, you know, a user keeps turning off their computer, you probably want to call them. PCI compliance, HIPAA compliance, us working in the DoD, things going off the STIG baseline. There's plenty of event IDs out there that you can help the other departments. Can you all still hear me good? Okay, all right. So this is kind of what Windows Event Framework looks like. Essentially, you're just deploying it through a GPO to all your computers. All your computers talk to one centralized server. Then from that server, you use something like NXLog or Elastic WinBeats, and then send it to your SIM. We use Elasticsearch because, you know, it's free. When we were building the pilot, they were a huge help in the process. And again, a lot of environments don't even pay for their paid-for subscriptions. So, you know, you basically can collect infinite logs. So for us, using Elastic was again, having no money was a big win for us. And then just the open source support. I'm sure many of you have seen the infinite amount of ELK or Elasticsearch blogs recently, especially by Cyber War Dog, which we have a few of his links in here as well. And so disclaimer, obviously, you know, there is no perfect solution, unfortunately, but fortunately that's why we also have a job, I guess. And just test this. And I mean, really one of the easiest ways for us to test these things is to just build a lab environment. You know, whether you got a 32 gig RAM computer or whatever, you just have a spare computer laying around. There's plenty of articles out there how to set up like a Windows AD environment, and then just push these GPOs, run some attacks, see what logs occur, and then go back and look at those in your environment. Were we missing them? Were we not missing them? we would have caught it, you know, and again, working with your red team if you can, if they talk to you. But, yeah. This is Adam.
Yeah. So Nate and I have the opportunity to monitor 2 production environments, and then we have our lab, actually 3 production environments. So the good thing about this is we have a lot of diversity in our user base. So there's one that's almost primarily devs only, and one that's engineers, security engineers. So that's interesting. We get a lot of different logs that we can go through, and it really helped us out with this process. We're going to get into the Cuckoo malware lab, which is really primarily where we start, executing malware. We have WEF set up there, and then we can go in and look at what logs are created for different malware samples. If you guys are worried about SIM and architecture and stuff like this slide's for you. If you don't have this already set up in your environment, you should expect to see 1.5 to 3 events per second per host. That's with we're from defense, right? So the dis is stig plus some more. There's a lot of stuff in the stig that should be in the stig that isn't there. For instance, scheduled tasks. Just a word of caution. If you go and enable object access especially, there's a setting in there that you can set, and you will fill up your security log in half an hour if you enable it. I enabled it on my machine. What it does is anytime a file is accessed, anytime a pipe is accessed, pretty much any object within the Microsoft environment gets logged. So it's really useful if you can handle that load. But you're also going to see just a stupid amount, millions of events per second. I had it in our environment for a little while, and we got like 200 gigabytes on one box in about half a day. So, and this is just a slide that'll show you, security is the big player here, followed by PowerShell. We do have Sysmon. We use it for a lot of stuff. So the Cuckoo malware lab, what we do is, we don't have the most resources in the world, so we like the free stuff. So we use primarily MalWR, VirusTotal, samples that friends send us. We monitor different Slacks and community resources. We have Cuckoo set up. What we do is we customize Cuckoo a little bit so that the submission tag gets forwarded with our WEF logs. So what we can do is when we have an interesting event that we see in Elastic, we can go click on the submission ID link for Cuckoo and then look at that piece of malware. And so we have a piece of malware ran that's really high in Cuckoo. Cuckoo, scores 7 out of 10 malicious based off the settings we have, and there's no logs. We can go in and start tinkering with the settings within Windows, looking for, what's available to us that we can find this. So that's a lot of how we got to some of the things that we found. So Nate and I, we're not the only ones looking at these logs who we work with. It's surprising the amount of people who are not getting Windows logs yet. So we'll go in and we'll be like, hey, we're going to help you out. We're going to give you these Windows logs. And then they're like, okay, well, what do I search for? And the answer is, for me anyways, pretty much everything. We have environments where there's like 10,000 hosts or so, and I can pull and look at every process creation by user accounts, and you basically pump it into Excel. It's not the fanciest thing in the world, but you can get it in Excel and use a pivot table, from like 1995, and to me it's the best. Like the dashboards that Splunk has, they're all very useful, but there's nothing faster than just dumping your logs into a CSV and looking at in a pivot table in Excel. It's just too, doesn't compare to anything else really. So just some commands that we run all the time. So you can delineate between system accounts and user accounts by looking for the $sign after the end of the machine name. So we do that, and I'll look at all the commands run by user accounts, and then I'll look at all the commands run by system accounts. And then, system running who am I? Come on, that's a pretty easy one, but there you go. And then the same people, they say, okay, well, I saw system running NSLOOKUP. Remedy does this. If you guys have Remedy in your environments, launches NSLOOKUP from the system account. So they thought it was, an incident. But what you have to do, and for some reason, a lot of people have trouble making this leap of logic, is you have to contextualize the incident, right? So what else did that account do around the same time? And then what else happened on that machine around the same time? And also, are there any other boxes that are running NSLOOKUP as system? These are the types of questions that you should ask yourself before you open an incident. The initial triage, this is what you need to do. So logs, probably one of the biggest downsides is that they're fragile. Extremely fragile. There's a million different ways that you can hide from them. The big one is changing the system time back. You can fix this with your subscription in WEF by just saying, grab everything from 8 hour, everything from the beginning of existence that's in on my logs. I want to grab those. Yeah, you can go back to the beginning of the event log, grab everything that was ever written to the event log in your subscription. But the downside is, with that is, if one of your subscriptions breaks later, and all your machines are suddenly asked to resubscribe, they send all their logs at once. So be careful with that. We've had to change our subscription and a few boxes so that it only pulls the last hour or so. I think the funniest thing with Windows logs that kind of cracks me up is if Windows can't write a log, for some reason it writes a log. So yeah, event 521. It's most commonly caused when a disk is full on a hard drive. So to me, it's like, that's amazing. How does that happen? So a lot of the most common one that we see with malware in the lab is just shutting off the event log service. This is something that's actually tricky to alert on because the event log service shuts down if a server is restarted, right? So you just have to kind of correlate shut down and restart events with these event logs. If it shuts down, the service shuts down and then you don't see the computer shut down, then you know it's probably a hit. So this is the Fisher-Price level of security Windows event logs, but it's extremely useful. Almost every dropper is going to leave a trace in 4688, and we'll show that later. APT droppers are leaving 4688 events on hosts. So the top one there, removing the ability to do shadow copies, right? So Windows will create shadow copies of your hard drive, and you can go back and recover files that way. So ransomware doesn't want you to recover your file, so it'll shut it off. If you see something like this in your environment, it's a sign like something bad is happening. So another big one for droppers is ransomware droppers, which we see a lot of in the lab, mostly because of going through malWR. We also see a lot of video game hacks, right? So I think it shows like the community of video gamers, 13-year-olds cheating on video games. They know about malWR apparently. But a lot of them use these WScript or C script, which run your JavaScript and VBA code for you. Also HTA files. Here it is a little bit bigger. So like I said, we see APT samples dropping 4688 events all the time. And here's one that we got hit with actually at VAE, a deep panda. It was related to the OPM breach, but you can see everything in here is if an analyst who knows what they're looking at saw this would know, okay, yeah, this is definitely malware, right? They have a process being called that ends in .bin and not a regular P file like MSI or EXE. There's a registry entry to add the persistence mechanism, and the names are just crazy. They didn't even try to hide, right? Another one that we see all the time in the malware lab is adding local admins. So check that. Task scheduling, like I said, if you're following the DISA STIG and you're in defense, this isn't even in the STIG. So go in and at the end of the talk.
If anybody here knows anybody that we can get a hold of, we have tried.
Yeah. So this is extremely useful, right? It gives you the image path for the file. Here's an example, system settings 43 that was in the lab. It shows you the image path, and it's really, really easy. You can go back 30 days and quickly aggregate on just unique names for the scheduled tasks and have an idea of like, okay, what is the system settings 43? Never seen that before. What's the image path? Oh yeah, it's no good. It's in local. It's in app data local. That's malware's favorite place to operate, right? So this is kind of to show off a lot of the dashboards we create within the SIMs that we use are just data tables. We haven't really found a lot of use yet for some of the other visualizations that you can do. One though that's actually pretty decent is bad logins 4776. And this shows me running, a brute force sort of scan on our network to try to log into accounts, and the bubble is the amount of attempts per second, right? So you can tell the ones below are just configuration issues. The biggest thing that you'll see is people mapping a file share on a server, maybe a jump box. They change their password, and then that computer continually tries to log in with their old password, and it causes a ridiculous amount of noise. With this, as long as your attacker is a little bit noisy, you'll see it. And don't, so 4776 bad logins, but then also look at good logins too, because you can track like, okay, Bob the admin is responsible for Remedy, and that's like 6 servers. But today, Bob the admin logged into 43 servers. That's a little strange, right? So look at successful logins too. You can also sometimes find rogue hosts on your network by the host name. For every login event, the host that attempted to log in, the name of it. Oh boy. A little warm. Just a bit.
This thing had been left in the car all night. You know what I mean? This might be a problem. I haven't had coffee this morning. This is the first warm drink, so I might have to use the restroom in a minute.
I'm now impressed. I was in Lee Holmes' talk. He took this like a champ. I think I would have vomited. Almost did. All right. So, moving on. So, WMI, if you haven't read his paper, Matt Graber, 2015 Black Hat, it's like the authoritative document on WMI. Pretty much every WMI talk since has pretty much just been Matt Graber's paper. Anyways, some of the stuff gets logged automatically by Windows to WMI activity operational if there's an error. So in this example, the error was the malware did a query for some of the for the BIOS, right? And that's an anti-analysis trick. They look for a VirtualBox, VMware. They're looking to see if they're in a virtual environment, basically. Well, this malware made that query, but they didn't set their timeout long enough on the query. They didn't set a timeout at all. So the WMI background, the framework in the background, took too long to respond, and it defaulted and wasn't able to respond. So that caused this error. So sometimes you'll get lucky and catch WMI activity through this log. But event tracing for Windows. When Nate and I first got into this, there was like no talks on it. Now we come to Derbycon, there's 675 talks. And everyone's tools are like 1,000 times cooler than what we have come up with. But that's what we enabled event tracing for Windows. It's really easy to do on the next slide. So I didn't see this in any of the other event tracing talks, but you can just go into Windows Event Viewer, go to the Show Analytic and Debug, enable it, enable the log, and now you're grabbing event tracing. It's not real time. It can be more verbose, but you have to make changes in the registry. There's links about how to do that in the resources section. And the other problem is it's not subscribable by WEF. So what I did was instead of going to an EVTX format, it goes to an ETL format. And PowerShell can read the ETL file. So what I do is I let it write to the ETL file, and then every 30 seconds I read the ETL file, put it to EVTX, which Windows can subscribe to, and then you can pump out your events that way. So even if you don't want to run scripts on your box all the time, go in and enable some of these trace logs in the event viewer. So then if you're doing post-mortem on an incident, you have them there, right? Set your log size to be a little bit bigger. The default's only 1 meg. You probably want it to be 25 megs or so, because it's you cannot underestimate the amount of logs you're going to get with these event tracing. It can be pretty hefty. So WMI is not too bad on most servers, but some software uses it heavily. And if you're in Red Team, Cyberpoint has a blog. I think they gave a talk about it last year about how you can use it as a keylogger. And then the other thing, if you're Red Team or Blue Team, you can start looking at all HTTPS headers within Internet Explorer. There's also event tracing stuff built into Firefox and Google Chrome, but you can't subscribe to those going through the event viewer. So there again, that's how you do it. That's how I do it. Super simple. Definitely check out Krabs and Matt Hastings' PowerShell module that he built. So here's some examples of WMI queries for anti-analysis. Again, this one was Win32 BIOS, where they're checking to see if VMware or VirtualBox is in there. But this time it was successful. That wouldn't have been logged to the old one. Now it's logged. They also, you'll see a whole mess of different events that will be generated by malware. You can log process creation. You can with WMIC, right? You can create a process. Malware droppers do it all the time. It gets logged in the WMI trace, but it's not very verbose. To get that level of detail, you're going to want to look at the FireEye script that's in here later. And then event consumer persistence. This is now caught by Sysmon 6.1. So, but it's also caught here in the EVT log. So this is PowerSploit. They call their persistence by default updater. So if you're a blue team and you go enable this, search for updater right away, because chances are the red team, if they use PowerSploit, hasn't changed the name of their command line event consumer. It also logs remote WMI, and the way that you look for that is, basically the account names are different. The machine name is logged. So this one is called Eugene, and it's being run on a box that is not Eugene. So one thing that you don't hear a lot of people talk about for some reason or another is you can write to Windows logs yourself. So if there's any sort of telemetry you want, we write it. We wrote a script for the ARP cache. Every 30 seconds, we want to see the ARP cache so we can get an idea of who our hosts are seeing on the network. It's sort of like a rogue system, or to gather the inventory that we want. You can do it really easily, new Windows event log or write event log. We have samples of us doing it with the ARP, and also I used it in the script that I wrote for taking ETL files, the EVTX files. The other thing is WMI filters, NT log events. The only people that are using this right now is the FireEye script to do WMI monitoring, if you're familiar with it. There's a lot more there, right? So WMI events, which are different from Windows events, so don't get confused. They're like events that are happening on your computer, such as a process creation, service creation, and that sort of thing. You can get a lot of information from that source, and using filters and event log consumers, you can get it into the application log and subscribe to it.
All right. Cool. So another hotness, PowerShell. There's been a lot of really great talks about this, the obfuscation coming with this sort of stuff from Lee Holmes and Daniel. I'm probably going to butcher his last name again, but we owe a lot to those folks. But at a minimum, when you deploy PowerShell logging, look for 4104 and warning. Unfortunately, the warning level is just a list that Microsoft has as suspicious. We wrote a parser for 4104 and 4103. 4103 is not like the whole script block log. Usually it's just like one-liners or two-liners. The script block log for 4104 can be about like 30,000 characters, between 30,000 and 40,000 characters. And if the script's really long, it basically will break it up into like 3 or however many it needs to divide by that number, right? So it's 120,000. It might break it up into 3 different events. So kind of like correlating that, we took some of the effort with based on the ID, the script block ID, but then also we went through and started basically hashing script block logs, and you can see over on the count towards the right, you got one script that's being run 650,000 times, and again, event overload can be an issue, but when you're using something like Elastic, where you can basically say how many times was each hash of the block logged, right? All 30,000 characters hashed, right? What's the total time, the unique hosts, and the unique users? So you can begin to see what scripts are commonly occurring, what scripts are probably a login script, like towards the 4th or 5th script, you can see the unique hosts and the unique users, right, match up pretty similarly. So more than likely, those are going to be login scripts. And then from there, you can just literally right-click. You'll never see that script again. Versus, as an analyst, I think I talked to somebody about this, but one big way of evasion that I've thought about besides all the people that do Red Team and the amazing work that they've released over the last couple of days, specifically with ACL Backdoors, which is going to be fun to test back in the lab when they release that, but is adding keywords that are that people normally whitelist. So like adding printer to the end, like hpprinter.exe to the end of your command line, sprinkling your events with like Ceph breakers, which are usually pipes and curly brackets to break JSON, or parentheses or greater than or equal to break XML. But if people aren't excluding things very specifically, like process name completely equals and this, if they just say starts with or ends with this, and you run your malware with that, you're going to basically bypass a lot of people's detection. So using this with something like script log, like I said, that's 30, 40,000 characters, and you're just like, does not contain, command.exe or something, and, you're easily going to miss some malware. Adam talked a lot about the kind of like the easier stuff, and then got into the WMI and ETW. A lot of those things, again, are initial compromises. A lot of the last part is focused on, again, we gave this talk in February, some of Harmjoy's older stuff, but it's still pretty useful. So these alerts are what he called AD backdoors. Essentially, once you've already gained some sort of privilege, giving yourself an infinite amount of privileges, which they just came out with another thing on Friday, again with the ACLs. But this one basically allows you to delegate use of any other user in the AD environment. Super low hit rate, right? 31 events over 30 days. And really the only malicious one is our simulation. Excuse me. Enabling more efficient hash cracking, Kerberos. So, once somebody gets in your environment, they basically downgrade the encryption of Kerberos, to enable RC4 or something that they can then put into Hashcat and crack. And again, I show how easy it is as an analyst to just basically exclude this, to go down from a few 100,000 events to 400 or 500. And Microsoft even, recommends that filter, which you can filter host side. You don't have to filter server side. You can filter in the XML, which we've given resources at the end that Microsoft shows. Another one, this is just one we came up with, but, which was kind of cool. I'm sure at least some people have seen this, but a domain admin can't troubleshoot a, file share access issue. So they just map the share drive, save the credentials, map the share drive as themselves with domain admin. So this is a query that we would see consistently. It was also pretty cool to see people log in from their host machine into their guest Windows VM or whatever share they have. And again, this takes just a few seconds to come up with a low hit rate like this, no matter how many events you have. And again, this is just me and Adam basically doing this stuff. So on top of the million other things we do, pretty confident that you all can do the same. This is another backdoor. This one I think is by Metcalf. Again, show you how easy it is. Just has an analyst with some of these visualizations to go, okay, here's this, here's that, here's this person adding an SPN to grant themselves rights back to that user. This is another one. Again, this is an exact hit. If you literally ever see this, run for the hills. And last example is just it's not a ton of use, but it's just kind of cool to show C levels. This is from one environment over 30 or 60, 90 days, all the Wi-Fi networks that our users connected to, and then Windows will even log, is it AES or is it WEP, or is it no encryption at all? So then, if you have some really high value users, you can say, hey, Joe Schmo, CEO, please stop connecting to open Wi-Fi at X place, right? And again, you can use Wiggle. We were hoping to release the Wiggle script, but Wiggle.net basically allows you, Windows will log the BSSID, you could take the BSSID, send it to Wiggle, it would give you back the longe and latitude, and then you can plot that in a map and look like kind of where all your users have been in the world, which don't tell them. A few more hunting possibilities. These are endless. Not going to go over all of them. I'm only going to be like 3 more minutes, so nobody else leave. There's limitless possibilities. Changing local time for evasion is really easy. You know, you're going to have VMware processes and VirtualBox processes do that, but a lot of the like Shamu and other Middle Eastern kind of like APT stuff or malware usually loves editing the time. That stuff's easy to detect. Also, they do scheduled task creation. Services, creating a backup image, maybe for data exfil, some other thing. Download a signed PE. I think somebody just said bitsadmin, search util, or a zip with a link file to using bitsadmin, which is a top example, which is a signed PE by Microsoft. So again, application whitelist bypassing, and then cert util, decode, and some other stuff. But again, a lot of these things are from our talk in February, so you know people have already blogged about most of this stuff. So again, it's just reiterating what they're saying, and then just a few one-offs that we've thought about. And this framework is really cool. So Florian Roth and Thomas Pisatsky, two, I think, yeah, they're European folks. Really great guys. Talk to them fairly often in their SIM working group. But they basically created what is a Yara framework for logs, whether it's Windows, Linux, application, some network. They just started doing most of those, but really good for Windows event logs and Linux logs. A lot of these things that I showed you, for example, this one, and these two. So like four of those 5 last slides I showed you are all in there. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, didn't go and look at every single one. There's at least hundreds of community submitted alerts. You can submit to them, submit a pull request or a commit request. And with Elastic, you can actually, they just recently released a script where you can turn all these things into an immediate alert. So if you're like, well, Nate, Adam, who the hell wants to sit here and look at these dashboards? Who has time to go through a CSV in Excel? Adam, I'm pretty sad you said that. You know, who has time to do that? Well, just turn it all into alerts and then go look at something else. You know, like none of this stuff is rocket science. It's not really hard. You know, we're just 2 folks that just stood on the shoulder of giants and just worked off of what really smart people have already created, you know. And that's what I think a lot of this industry is about, is sharing tools. So, this is just an example, again, if you want to do a dashboard, but, of some of their alerts already created that you can search. But again, if you don't want a dashboard and you want just a pager alert via an SMS or an email or something, you can use that link down there at the bottom, which they just did a pull request, I think, a few days ago. And all right, give me just a few minutes. So monitoring, check for people editing your GPOs that are used for your process, your PowerShell logging, your process auditing, Windows errors. You'd be surprised, like, oh, well, why would I monitor Windows errors, you know, if I'm not going to get the logs anyways? Again, Windows, like WEF subscriptions, will log an error, and those are really easy to look at. Usually those always get shipped correctly if Kerberos, the authentication is set. People disabling auditing down there at the bottom. These are a bunch of one-off and gotchas. Really the only one, there's just 1 or 2 I want to mention. Down at the bottom, the very bottom, make sure that your network service can read the built-in event log reader, and then don't run your SIM on the same infrastructure that you monitor. I can't stress this enough. I think it goes without saying, but, you know, don't do it. And then to pivot off of what Adam said, for one more thing, is that use WEF as an already built-in agent, as an already built-in software. You're not installing anything extra on your computers. You're not opening up an attack vector. It's using built-in Kerberos authentication. So, like Adam said, with using the ARP the ARP script, for those who are unlucky like us who have to monitor way more than just Windows devices, how the hell do we go and pull the logs or know what else is on our network? So using that ARP cache from our Windows host as kind of like scouts or whatever you want to say, pulling that back in, comparing that to our existing inventory and saying like, well, here's 100 hosts that we had no idea existed. You can't protect what you don't know exists. So these are just some recommended GPOs, slow link detection and those sort of things, like having did help desk and system admin before what I'm doing now, dealing with like users that would change the background to some picture they shouldn't have or something. If the GPO doesn't change, Windows won't reapply it unless you do this. So even if the setting changed on the host itself, if you don't put these settings in, then they won't reapply until that actual GPO has changed. So these ones are huge. These are all the resources. I'm just going to skip through the rest. These are all the folks that I have push notifications for Twitter. If you follow this list, you're basically going to be pretty much in the know of anything going on in Windows, in red team, blue team, and those sort of things. Yep. We would love collaboration. Got any questions, comments? Nope. Oh. Yep. So with the XPack, they have built in, so it's like transport over HTTPS, again, always running it on another environment. What were you thinking?